How you guys all doing today? Welcome back to the GSMC Chip Shot Football Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Sports Network. I'm your host, Manny Maradiege. Today is September 24th here, already past Week 3 of the NFL. Looking forward to Week 4, but we can't move on without talking about the games last night. There was two games on Monday Night Football last night. One very good one and another one not so entertaining, but we're still going to talk about it. We're going to go over Jayden Daniels and his stellar performance against the Cincinnati Bengals. Also, the other game, Josh Allen and the Bills dominating the Jaguars, sending them to 0-3. Plus, mentioning another still undefeated team, the Pittsburgh Steelers, and Justin Fields, impressing yet again in their victory against the Los Angeles Chargers. All that and more coming up on today's show. Make sure to stick around for all of our topics on today's show. But before we get started on the first segment, I'd like to remind you guys, if you have any questions during the show, we want to hear about it. Your input is a big part of what makes this show great, makes it more interactive and more conversational, and we thrive on your energy and insights. So whether it's a quick comment, a thoughtful question, or just an opinion you want to share about anything in the NFL or anything I say, please drop it in the chat box. Now, if you want to make it absolutely sure that I see it and that your message features on today's show, there's an easy way to go about that. Just use the super chat feature available to you guys now. Just click the $sign at the bottom of the chat box to send in your super chat. This way, it guarantees that your message gets on the air, and it's also a fantastic way to support our channel. We rely on you guys and your support to bring you guys the sports content that you love, and we appreciate it every time you guys are able to do that. So go ahead and let us know what you're thinking. Hit the super chat button, and let's keep this show as interactive and as exciting as possible. Still, you have the alternative option to use the GSMCpodcast.net link to tip and donate and leave any comments and questions there if you do prefer that alternate method. So go ahead and use that, or the new super chat feature as well, to help us out and feature on the show. I always appreciate when you guys have anything to say, ask me any questions, or just make a comment on anything you saw over the weekend. There's a lot of interesting things going on so early on in the NFL, and starting just from last night, a tale of two games. We're going to get to both of them, but we're going to start off with what I thought stole the show last night on both games. In both games, I thought the best game of the night was between the Commanders and the Cincinnati Bengals, right? The Commanders get away with a 38-33 win over the Bengals. Washington now goes to 2-1, actually leading the NFC East right now, and Cincinnati fall to 0-3, failing to win all of their first three games, 2 at home, now sending them to 0-2 at home and 0-1 on the road out of those 3 games. But like I said, Jayden Daniels, the story of this game for me, the star of the show, and not just this game, right? Because you're including Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, and then when you combine it with the other game, essentially all on the same night, right? Josh Allen, James Cook, Trevor Lawrence, all these guys in both games. I thought Jayden Daniels, to me, really culminated his performance in the best story, right? If that makes sense, because last night he was 21 of 23, 254 yards through the air, and 2 passing touchdowns, his first of his career. 12 carries also and 39 rushing yards on top of that, and another rushing touchdown as well. He accounted for 3 touchdowns last night, and very, very impressed with what I saw. Not just from Jayden, right? He was the conductor of everything, but really the offense that I saw from Washington was very impressive, right? The running game was very good. I thought some guys stepped up when they needed to. Luke McCaffrey looked pretty well. Zach Ertz becoming more of a reliable option for Jayden Daniels, it looks like. And Terry McLaurin, right? We can't go without mentioning him. He finally had that big game that the Commanders fans, that everybody really was waiting for him to have with this new quarterback, seeing how their connection, finally exploded. And both of them had a large role to take in this game. But, just overall, this offense was something that I wasn't expecting. 38 points put up on the Bengals, right? You could say that's impressive for the Commanders, and that's what I'm trying to say. But likewise, a bit of me can't go without mentioning the Bengals' just defense, right? Their Defense, again, did not impress or look like it had any sort of resistance, especially because Washington's offense scored touchdowns on their first 4 drives to establish a 28-13 lead at one point. And from that point, you look at the Commanders' defense overall, and what they have not been able to do essentially is stopping the run or just creating any sort of resistance, like I said, right? Because against the run last night, it was not that great of a performance. And you look at all 3 games as well. Against New England, they gave up 170 yards rushing to Ramondre Stevenson. Most of that went to. Then also against the Chiefs, it was another 149 rushing yards. I think it was Washington Commanders. So, we always talk about, or the predominant defense that we talk about and criticize is the Cowboys for their run defense. But I think now, looking at the last 3 games, Washington, and I know they didn't have their defensive tackle playing last night, which was huge, right? Because he's right in the middle of everything. But even still, I haven't been that impressed with what I've seen from Cincinnati overall. And that, kind of goes back into the fact that Cincinnati, yes, they can put up points. They didn't go away, to give them credit, right? They didn't go away and just sort of lie down, being down 28-13. Joe Burrow still on the night was 29 for 38, 324 yards, and 3 touchdowns. It was great to see him connect with Jamar Chase on 2 instances for those 2 touchdowns. He had 6 receptions, 118 yards, and the secondary really wasn't holding up too great against Jamar in that passing game, but they made some timely stops, forced the Bengals to kick some field goals. They didn't look great in the red zone either, so that's a bit alarming from that side of the ball as well. But they had a field goal. They missed a field goal as well, the Bengals did. Evan McPherson pulled it a little bit wide, so they had that missed opportunity, and then not being able to stop the Commanders. We've seen it already on a few instances where these offenses, when they're clicking, it's a game of runs. Whoever gets hot in a certain game or over a certain period, they end up looking very well. And that's what the Commanders did in this game. You look at the Saints against the Cowboys, the Saints against the Panthers as well. The Panthers just recently in their game against the Raiders just this past week, they got hot to start the game, and then, they never looked back. So it seems like that's a growing theme right now, starting off fast. And it's not breaking news, but it feels like now more than ever, teams are starting fast and are really putting their foot down on establishing these leads. And I think the Commanders not only were able to do that through Jayden Daniels, and that's a great sight to see, right? Because up until this point, he had not thrown a touchdown. And while the Cincinnati Bengals offense was right there with them, keeping up with them, this offense for the Commanders and Jayden Daniels as well, I felt the bigger moments of the game were as the Bengals, kind of struggled in some of those, right? You talk about the red zone offense that they kind of stuttered in. The Commanders on the other side, right from the beginning, you saw them go for it on some early 4th down, some early 4th and shorts. They ended up converting on those. And also some big 3rd downs down the stretch of the game. They were also able to convert, and none bigger, right? None bigger than that 3rd down conversion. 0 coverage on the backside for the Bengals. The Bengals needed a stop at that point in the game. You saw, if you were watching the game, you knew Geno Stone was going to come in from the right side and have a free shot essentially on Jayden Daniels, and Terry McLaurin was going up against Dax Hill. He had to beat him. You'd like to go to your best receiver in that instance. That's what Jayden Daniels did. He sat in the pocket. Credit to him, right? For as much stick as he might get for his slight frame or anything like that, he did not blink. He did not, kind of cringe down or just kind of shy away from the hit. He stood in there, stared down Geno Stone, and waited until the last possible second to throw that perfect ball down the right sideline to Terry McLaurin, and that essentially sealed the game, right? And this is the first breakout performance we've seen from these highly drafted quarterbacks, right? Caleb struggled a little bit. Drake May obviously not playing. Bo Nix won his first game, but I still think people aren't too convinced with his performances yet, at least not to the level of Jayden Daniels, right? And this is a big win for them because they were obviously the underdog going into this on the road in Cincinnati, and now you get this win and lead the division essentially. And not only that, you get this breakout performance from Jayden, and it infuses a lot of confidence now going forward in the fans, in the players, that we have a legitimate quarterback now, a legitimate face leader of this franchise that makes a world of difference in these teams, in these locker rooms, right? When you know you have a guy that you can rely upon to do superhuman things sometimes with some of the throws and accuracy. You know, he was 21 for 23. That's a single season record for a rookie in his first year. So special display from Jayden Daniels. And then just lastly here, to talk about the Bengals, I talked about how their defense is worrying. The worries I had about them in the offseason, where they didn't address the corner position, they didn't really address anywhere else to kind of bring in some more talent on the defensive line or to the linebacker position. They have Dax Hill playing at corner opposite of Cam Taylor-Britt, and you know, Dax Hill's an all-right player, but he's not a corner. He's a safety. He was drafted out of Michigan to be a safety, and now having him out there, I don't think that really fits on a championship-level defense. And Cam Taylor-Britt is all right. You know, he's a good player, but still, you saw him get beat on that long ball to Terry McLaurin. You know, he's all right to be their number one corner, but I just feel like those worries, those non-addressed issues in the offseason are sort of catching up to them right now. And it's interesting how this dynamic has changed, right? Because before, when Joe Burrow got there, this defense was actually very good, very underrated. You know, you go back to that performance against the Titans where Joe Burrow got sacked 9 times, and this defense still held on for them to come back and win that game. But now, Joe Burrow is clearly better, right? This offense is clearly very good in terms of putting up points, but now the defense has flipped, and now they just can't seem to stop anything that is hit right at them. So that is a big point of it. Again, DJ Reader was not there, or he actually moved on to the Detroit Lions, another big loss for them. So that is something that they're going to have to deal with. Starting fast is going to have to be essential for them. They can't have those 3-and-outs or just have their offense stall early on, because you just don't know about this defense, right? You just don't know who and what their MO is going to be, right? Because they have good pass rushers in Sam Hubbard and Trey Hendrickson, but once you go down, like we've said about the Cowboys in many instances, your pass rush can't really, you know, just fully focus on the quarterback, right? When you know that they're running the ball very well, you have to pull all your focus to that, and then once you do that, you might be over-aggressive, and they hit you with play action, and then everything is just kind of whirling at that point for that defense. So they have to kind of get that under wraps, kind of focus on stopping the run most of all. And, you know, they play the Panthers next week. I'm not going to talk any sort of smack on the Panthers. They just put up 30-plus points on the Raiders. I picked the Raiders to win that game. So I don't know. I don't know what to think of this Bengals team overall. They're 0-3. Yeah, it doesn't look great, but they can't lose to the Panthers. I'm not going to pick anything yet. We're going to save that till later in the week, but if they lose to the Panthers, man, like that is something. I don't know if I'd be more impressed with the Panthers or more disappointed with the Bengals, but we'll cross that bridge when we get there. But for right now, we're going to move on to the other Monday Night Football game that was on last night. Not as entertaining, but still having a lot to talk about, with the Bills dominating the Jaguars, Josh Allen putting on yet another show, whereas Trevor Lawrence, not so much the same. So we're going to get into all of that after our first break. You're listening to the GSMC Chip Shot Football Podcast.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign.
I wanna be the greatest. Everybody on the fake shit. I look around and feel like everybody is the fakest. I make this every day and I'm impatient, hoping one day I blow up from the basement. Statement, the top is so vacant. I don't hear shit that I think is amazing. Waiting for my day when I'm playing sold out shows for 1,000 faces. Hey, give me that crown, get in my way and to be put down. It ain't your place, all this my town. If I want that shit, then I'll get it right now. I'm losing it, the noose it fits. I'm losing shit, a stupid myth. You choose to live or choose to dip. You choose to fight or lose your grip and lose a gift.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind?
Thank you for joining me back here on the GSMC Chip Shot Football Podcast. And now we're going straight into the second Monday Night Football game from last night, the earlier one of the two games. And for me, and I'm sure for a lot of people, I'm sure it didn't last long on many people's TVs. It didn't on mine, at least, because I tuned into the game expecting to see at least I was expecting to at least be there till halftime, but I turned the game off after Keon Coleman scored that touchdown, I think, to make it 20-3. And then I just mainly watched the other Monday Night Football game and Monday Night Raw as well. And I don't regret it one bit because this game ended 47-10. The Bills destroying the Jaguars, going down to 3-0, and the Jags still remaining winless at 0-3. The score was 34-3 at halftime, basically over before the second half started, obviously. And Josh Allen, another masterful performance in that game. I'll actually show you the kind of difference that we're talking about from Josh Allen and the difference in performance as well with Trevor Lawrence. Because if you look at these stats here, it just says it all itself right on the screen. You look at Josh Allen. In this game, he was 23 of 30, 263 yards, 4 touchdowns in the first half, I might add you. He's the first quarterback to throw for 4 first-half touchdowns on Monday Night Football since Ben Roethlisberger, and this was the lowest scoring performance in the Trevor Lawrence era for the Jaguars and obviously for Lawrence himself. And these two, the disparity in the difference with how these two played, I go back to the preview that I had yesterday, and I mentioned how one of the factors will be how each quarterback obviously plays, kind of knowing that Josh Allen, I didn't expect Josh Allen to kind of drop or struggle or anything like that, especially at home. But it was really more so of a call out or a call to action for Trevor Lawrence because, he had to play great in this game to give the Jaguars a chance. He had to play better than any of the performances we've seen so far for them to at least have a chance because that defense was a major concern for me and it showed, right? The Bills had no trouble going up and down the field, scoring points, over 30 points in just the first half. They scored that many points in the entire game against the Arizona Cardinals and pretty much the same thing against the Miami Dolphins. And, the Jaguars couldn't hold up for more than a half. So I knew that defense for the Jaguars was going to be a concern for me outside of their defensive line. But, Trevor Lawrence just didn't live up to the bill. And I don't want to make it sound like it's totally on him. But, it's hard to just flat out defend him from some of the criticisms because he hasn't been great at that much this season. There has been some moments where he's made some nice throws or he's made some plays to kind of keep this offense going. But it feels like something's off this year, and I can't understand why because they basically brought back the same offense as last year, where at one point they were 8-3, I think, to lead the entire AFC. Of course, you lose Calvin Ridley. That's the biggest loss that they had this year, but their defense got better on the defensive line. They're pretty unlucky with injuries, but Travis Etienne hasn't really gotten going. It looks like their offensive tackles and their offensive line overall have taken a step back. And again, they added a guy like Mitch Morse at center. And they have pretty much the same tackles and same offensive line. So I am puzzled to understand why the team around Trevor Lawrence, I guess if you want to put it, a good amount of the blame on them, why it's not really clicking at this point. And I think it's easier to put it on Doug Peterson as well, to just kind of say, let's change the coach and move on. But, I am a fan of Doug Peterson. I think he is a good coach, so I can't just put all the blame on him after he's had success elsewhere, right? Notably winning the Super Bowl with the Eagles and just last year having a great season with this team. So as much as I don't want to blame Trevor, it's still hard not to because he is playing the quarterback position, and especially when the other guy on the other team is playing to this level, it's hard to kind of hide away from the criticism, right? When one team's quarterback is almost perfect on the night, everybody else looks at the other quarterback and thinks, all right, well, how did this guy do? And you look at the numbers, and the numbers don't tell the entire story, obviously, when it's a combination of the offense and defense, right? As much as the offense and just Josh Allen alone as a talent is phenomenal, I think, again, I find myself on here giving credit to the mastermind behind all of this. Their offensive coordinator, Joe Brady, for the Buffalo Bills, continues to show his excellence because everything looks like, when I'm watching the Bills, it looks like they're maneuvering the opposing defense and maneuvering them in a way that every throw that is supposed to go to whatever wide receiver is getting there on time, on the right rhythm and everything. They never look out of sync. They never look like they're flustered or trying to audible to different things because something isn't what they thought it would be. You know, everything that this offense seems to be firing on right now is working to perfection. And again, a lot of it will go to the talent of Josh Allen, you know, building this team around him. But I think, again, you can't go without mentioning Joe Brady and how well of a job he's done to end up in this situation, right? With Stephon Diggs moving on, you bring in guys that aren't household names, but still you somehow look better than how you finished the year last year. And they were in a tight game with the Kansas City Chiefs, if not for a missed field goal. I can't remember if that would have tied it or would have, you know, gave them the lead. I'm pretty sure it would have tied the game in that playoff game, but regardless of that, they look good to end the year last year. Now Stephon Diggs moves on, obviously, and still they're somehow better. That can't all just be on Josh for as good as he is. Joe Brady's doing a great job with that. You know, that's 31 plus points now in each of their first games without those household names like I mentioned, and it's all a perfect fit in a well-rounded system that is very balanced. You know, they run the ball very well. They use Josh's arm when they need to. Josh isn't rolling out every other play and, you know, chucking it across his body or down the middle of the field anymore. Everything is very calculated and very rhythmic up until this point. And I didn't want to bring it up, but talking about fitting into this perfect system, Josh Allen mentioned after the game that this is a lot easier, or it's a lot better when nobody cares about the stats, nobody cares when or who's scoring the touchdowns, and everybody right from the moment he said that, you know, pointed to Stephon Diggs and how there might have been issues there with how Diggs' production, you know, sort of dipped last year and how that could have created a problem between them, and how, you know, we saw the riffs on the sideline and things like that. People kind of took that once Josh said it and kind of ran with it, which, I don't know. I mean, it looks like the Bills weren't awful with Stephon Diggs. Obviously, they made it to the AFC Conference championship game, so it's not like, you know, it wasn't working out completely, but I think there was some tension there, and people saw that, heard that quote, and right away took it as a shot to Stephon Diggs. You know, if it is, if it isn't, it doesn't really matter now. You know, Diggs is in a great situation. Josh is running the league, front runner for MVP probably, but in this game, you know, that is as expected. And I wanted to bring up this question because, you know, I had the Bills winning in this game, but the question that popped up to me in how dominant this win ended up playing out was how did we learn more about the Bills or did we learn more about the Jacksonville Jaguars after this game? Because I know the Bills were going to be good, or they looked good in the first 2 weeks, but I think now going back at home against another young, highest paid quarterback in the NFL, a team that was very good last year, still 0-2, you know, you're not writing anyone completely off yet, but I thought this could be a time where maybe Trevor, great opportunity to do it, everyone watching on Monday Night Football to kind of stake your claim and shake everything back to the way it should be with you playing great, but it didn't work out like that, right? The Bills, even though they played better and more dominant than I even predicted, I feel like after this performance from the Jaguars mostly, I feel like I learned more about them than I did about the Bills because I picked them to win anyway, so if they won by 10 or however many, 37 points like they did, I wouldn't have been surprised, to be honest. And now, not to say that this Jaguars offense is the worst or anything, but it is struggling to run the ball, obviously, so that is something that now I'm starting to understand, whereas week 1 through week 2, I'm thinking, all right, they're just starting off slow, it's not really clicking just yet, but now 3 weeks in, and Travis Etienne is still not producing these explosive numbers like we saw last year as well, and that's one of the main reasons why. Something about this offensive line, the run game, and Trevor, all kind of culminating into the reason where this offense just doesn't look as explosive as it once did. Last year, Travis was establishing everything. He was going out, and they were kind of getting out in front of teams, and it was easier for their defense to play off of that, right? That's the story of the entire season, right? Having your defense play with the lead, and that's how you kind of mask one side of the ball. If you have a dominant defense, they keep the score low and make sure the offense is able to get back into it. And if you have a dominant offense, you get out in front, and if your defense isn't as good, it doesn't really hurt them as much because they know they're playing with a cushion, right? So it looks like the Jaguars don't have either of that because the offensive line is kind of struggling now. They're over-relying on guys like Brian Thomas Jr., who's only a rookie, Gabe Davis, Christian Kirk. They obviously missed Evan Ingram, right, not playing in last night's game. But to me, the pieces don't fit too much with this team because the Jaguars' defense isn't good enough to hold up very long against elite offenses, and they can sort of hang in there with average offenses, right? But this Jaguars defense come in with a depleted secondary, no Darnell Savage, no Tyus Campbell, two of their better secondary players, and their defensive line can't do it all, especially when they're playing from behind, and that pass rush, again, like we mentioned in the last segment, is lessened. They can't get after Josh Allen, and then Josh Allen, is just sitting back there picking them apart. It's very demoralizing when all of that is happening at once, and to me, we learned that the Jaguars, the defense is a bigger problem than I thought. Their O-line is struggling as well, like I said. They allowed 3 sacks, 4 sacks, and then 4 sacks again last night. Without Evan Ingram, it really limits this offense and the options for Trevor Lawrence. And again, I'm mentioning things around Trevor, but also Trevor's inconsistencies with the throws that he made. The one he sailed over, Brian Thomas Jr., was not great. The window wasn't wide open, like 15 or 20 yards, but it was big enough for Trevor to at least put it behind him or a little bit in front of him. He kind of sailed it over him right into the hands of DeMar Hamlin. So that didn't look great, and I think these inconsistencies can't happen, and it's not fair that they can't happen, right? Because every quarterback makes mistakes, every quarterback has bad throws, but especially young ones. Trevor is, I think, only just about to turn 25. But even still, it's not fair, and I say that because the defense, again, isn't equipped well enough to kind of mask those mistakes. Trevor's forced to play to a higher level right now, and the margin of error is so small for Trevor that once he makes a bad throw or a bad decision, it feels like it's amplified because their defense can't stop anybody, not on the running game especially as well. And you look at other situations as well where the quarterback might have inconsistencies or the quarterback might have bad throws or bad decisions. You look at Pittsburgh, Minnesota a little bit, but Sam Darnold is playing very well. Derek Carr, showing some of the deficiencies that he may have for the Saints. The Eagles with the turnovers that Jalen Hurts might have, and the Chargers as well, not having as many weapons or just as many as the Jaguars do. All of them have very, very good defenses, right? The Chargers and the Steelers have two of the best ones. The Vikings defense is impressing a lot of people around the league. The Saints just put up a good defensive performance against the Eagles, and likewise, the Eagles just shut down the Saints offense. So whether their quarterbacks, like Trevor, might have bad moments or turnovers or something like that, their defenses are there to kind of save them a little bit, hold opposing offenses to lower scores, and still giving them a chance, keeping them in the game. The Jaguars don't have that, so you get scores like this, right? When you're going up against the Bills offense that doesn't miss on anything, and your offense is stuttering, you find yourself down 28-3, and you can't do anything about it, right? You can't stop anybody, and the offense really isn't equipped as well as it once was. So that's kind of the reasoning why I think the score kind of played out like this. Apart from obviously the Bills being a very good team, they're proving that. The Jaguars' issues in this game aren't just because they played the Bills. They kind of go deeper than that. And I'll be interested to see how they try and cover that up a little bit here, because now at 0-3, they're fortunate that that division isn't running away with the rest of the teams, right? Tennessee is also 0-3. The Colts are only 1-2. And the Texans just lost as well. So it's not completely away from them, but bigger picture in the entire conference and could start to look a little bleak if by next week we're seeing the same thing. So the Bills, dominant win overall. Jaguars still have some problems that they have to kind of deal with going forward. But speaking about the AFC, we moved to a better situation, like I mentioned, with the Steelers. Now focusing in more on that game, talking about their performance against the Chargers. Steelers win that game 20-10. The biggest story could be that Justin Fields has solidified himself as the starting quarterback, in my opinion. I'll tell you guys why I believe that, and going over some of the recap of that game in the next segment after this break. We'll be right back.
Looking for your daily fix of sports talk without having to pay for it? GSMC Sports Network is available on YouTube. Just search GSMC Sports Network. Get your fix of daily sports talk shows on YouTube, absolutely free. NFL, college football, NBA, MLB, MMA, UFC, fantasy football, and so much more. GSMC Sports Network has shows running all day long, with new sports shows starting every 2 hours. Just like on your favorite cable sports channel, except GSMC Sports Network is absolutely free. Just search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube to catch one of your new favorite shows, like the GSMC College Football Podcast, Chip Shot Football Podcast, Hoops and Heels Women's Sports Podcast, GSMC Basketball Podcast, and so many more. Check it out for yourself. GSMC Sports Network, now available on YouTube absolutely free. Search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube right now.
Jumping back into the action on today's show, looking back at some of the games from Sunday, not just last night. I know we didn't talk about this team, the Pittsburgh Steelers, going to 3-0 on yesterday's show, but I had to go over it just because the story of this game still continues to be Justin Fields, and this was the first home game for the Pittsburgh Steelers up against a very, very competent opponent in the Los Angeles Chargers, surprising a lot of people, I think, early on. Yeah, they might have played the Raiders. Yeah, they might have played the Panthers when they still looked like a very bad football team, but still, the way that they were winning games, dominating in the running game. J.K. Dobbins, I think, was the leading rusher in the NFL after the first 2 weeks. So this past Sunday, both of them entered the game at 2-0. Very defensive-heavy game, squaring off against each other. Another week of watching and waiting from the Steelers side on how Russ, was dealing with that calf injury, whether or not he was going to be healthy for this game throughout the week. It ended up that he wasn't. He was inactive again. But I think time is starting to run out a little bit for Russell Wilson, because that looks to be that question about whether or not Russ is the starter or not when he comes back, to me, feels like it is over now, just because the fact that Justin Fields not only got the win again for the Steelers, but to go 3-0 and to put up more points and play a lot better than we have seen him play. It looks like there's almost no other option now but to keep him in, and it feels like that just because you look at the game from Justin Fields, right? 25 of 32. He completed his first 10 passes in this contest. He threw for 245 yards and a touchdown and an interception as well. I believe that might be his first one of the season, if I'm not mistaken. I'm pretty sure that's right. Yeah, his first interception of the year. It was on a tip ball, which kind of ricocheted around everybody, but still, it doesn't look great. But, there was some context behind that. And Fields overall having his best game in this one. Elsewhere, you got some contributions from Calvin Austin III, 4 receptions for 95 yards and a touchdown. That big 55-yard touchdown to kind of seal it there for the Steelers in that second half. And their defense continued to play very well. They got 5 sacks on the day. Nick Herbig came in for the injured Alex Highsmith, and he recorded 2 sacks. And Justin Herbert looked like he was playing very well to start this game. He was and finished 12 of 18 for 125 yards and a touchdown already before he got injured and wasn't able to return there early in the third quarter. And J.K. Dobbins, the leading rusher, like I said, coming into this game, he had 15 carries for 44 yards, only 44 yards, where in the first 2 games he had 130-plus yards in each game in the first 2 weeks. So Very impressive performance overall. I think for the Steelers, definitely their most complete performance out of the first 2 weeks. And looking at this game a little bit more in depth, the Chargers actually started off very well. They took the lead with that touchdown throw to Quentin Johnston after each team went 3 and out for the first couple possessions for each side. The Chargers found the breakthrough early, and the thing that I liked about the Steelers and how impressed I was with them just early on, finding themselves at a deficit, was that they responded right away with another drive that Justin Fields finished off with a 5-yard touchdown run and keeping the score at 7-7 before the Chargers ended up taking the lead 10-7 at halftime. And then returning from the half, you had that injury to Justin Herbert, and that threw everything off, right? Because, like I said, Justin was playing very well. Justin Herbert was playing very impressive and very good football up until that point. It looked like the Steelers' defense wasn't really getting after him as dominant as they were against like Bo Nix or Kirk Cousins especially. They weren't really getting to a point where Justin had to like move around or he was scrambling or things like that. So that was a bit alarming as a Steelers fan watching the game, but unfortunately he did take a sack, and then once he got up from that, he was with a very notable limp, and just being precautious, and the fact that Justin just didn't look like he could continue, they took him out of the game. Taylor Heineke came in, and then from that point on there was really no contest. Unfortunately, if you were watching the game as a neutral fan, the level of competition sort of dropped because Taylor Heineke, no shade or disrespect to him, right? It's not the same as having your starting quarterback in there, obviously. So after that point, Pittsburgh only added 2 field goals after that before, like I said, Calvin Austin took that 55-yard touchdown to the house to make it 20-10, and the Chargers just simply couldn't respond. Even though their defense was playing pretty solid still in the second half, the offense just wasn't there. The Chargers were held to -5 yards in the second half and went scoreless from halftime to the rest of the game. And while that was a bit of a bummer to kind of see one side be depleted because their starting quarterback went out, I think it shouldn't take away from the fact that Justin Fields looked a lot better, not just on the stat sheet where he did improve, right? 245 yards, did some work with his legs as well. But looking at the performance as much as I could on Sunday, the throws that he was making impressed me as well. There was a throw where you could really see the growth from Justin Fields was at some point in the second quarter, I believe. The ball was snapped and he was kind of sitting there in the pocket and it was starting to collapse on him, and rather than just putting his head down and running straight or trying to get through any sort of way to kind of gain some yardage, he rolled out to the left, and still he had his head up, and instead of rolling out and just running, he was rolling out with the purpose of still buying himself more time to throw it down the field, and that's exactly what he did, finding George Pickens down the left sideline, gaining big yardage, and they almost finished it off with a field goal to make it 10-10 at halftime. But another missed opportunity was from Pat Freiermuth, where he dropped the ball that, again, Justin Fields fit into a very tight window up the seam, right where only Pat could get it, but unfortunately he dropped it and they couldn't get any points off of that. But the throws that he was making, that one on top of the one to Calvin Austin as well, he kind of timed it, kind of fitted through a couple of Chargers defenders, and Calvin Austin just did the rest from there. There was another throw to Calvin Austin down the seam that I was impressed with, the timing and the rhythm of everything. It feels like he's not rushing through everything anymore. It feels like, or I shouldn't say anymore, I should just say in this week's game, because he's not a finished product by any means, but it is certainly encouraging to see him kind of settle down, kind of know the offense, and not just run for the sake of running anymore. He's looking more comfortable, less frantic with the protection breaking down, and he even said it after the game by saying in an interview that he said, "I've grown a lot over the past year, the past few months, so I'm definitely feeling a lot more confident when I'm out on the field." And he also said he feels a sense of peace out on the field now versus when he was with the Chicago Bears. And that has to do with a lot of things, right? I just feel like the situation with the Steelers overall as an organization is better than it is in Chicago, and then you add on the coaching and the different offense now that he's working under with Arthur Smith, working off of the run rather than just being the entire show and having all that pressure on him. He's, as much as he did play well this past week against the Chargers, and I felt like he was the best player out there in my opinion, it's still a run-heavy team, so it's a run-first team, so I think that has helped him out tremendously, and just working on the smaller, finer details of being a quarterback, right? The footwork, they've worked a lot on that as well. His mechanics all throughout the offseason. You heard it everywhere, essentially, how Justin was a work in progress for them through the offseason and then ideally through the regular season if Russ was healthy. But, of course, that didn't pan out like everybody expected. And now Justin Fields getting better each and every week. Now they have another road game, I want to say, against the Indianapolis Colts, who just got their first win. Mike Tomlin said today in his press conference that Justin is, or they're going to approach this week still the same way, with Justin expected to start against the Colts because nothing has really changed with Russell Wilson. So now it kind of leads me into that next part of it, rather about Russell Wilson and whether or not, like, what do we think about Russ? Where do we go now with Russ moving forward, right? Because this is still his job, it feels like. And Mike Tomlin refuses to kind of name Justin as the solidified starter right now, basically because he said today that there's just no need to, which is fair. If Russ is still hurt, there's no need to name Justin the starter anyway, because he is going to start anyway with Russ being hurt. But with that, it's kind of technically still up in the air, but to me, it just feels like if Justin goes out there again against the Colts on the road, especially, again, another good running team with not just the running back to worry about, but also Anthony Richardson being just as big a threat as any quarterback that there is in the NFL running. If the Steelers go out, do their thing on defense and Justin plays to the level that he just played to, or maybe even better, then you got next week, week 5 against the Dallas Cowboys at home. You're going to tell me that Russ, if he's healthy, he's just going to start right away against the Dallas Cowboys at home after you went 4-0 with Justin Fields? I can't buy that story, because Russ, for as good as you might be, with his resume and who he is as a player and just the reputation he has, Justin, from just a coaching morale point of view, he's earned the right to start, and he's earned the right to kind of have the trust of everybody until he loses it, essentially, to me, at this point, because the Chargers were very good, very well coached, very tough on the defensive side of the ball, but eventually, with the loss of Herbert and, the Steelers kind of breaking them down towards the end of the game, I thought that was a good win. And now moving forward, with this team, they might not be a juggernaut offensively, but I feel like it's another just step towards getting better. And I think that's what all teams are doing right now. Every team is trying to work through something that they're trying to get better at, right? The Chiefs might not look great on offense sometimes, or the Bengals also, their defense isn't looking great. The Cowboys, another team that has their own struggles. The Seahawks might struggle. Even though they're undefeated, they might not be as prolific on offense or something like that as well. Every team is working through something, and no team is perfect. I don't think any team wants to be perfect 4 weeks in. So the fact that the Steelers are still working on their offense, getting in the end zone a lot more often, is something that I think is just natural, and it feels like it's fitting in perfectly with the progression of Justin. The better he plays, he played better this week compared to the first 2 weeks, and they put up more points. He looked better, and just overall this offense just looked a lot more comfortable at home against a very good opponent. And, good teams, solid teams up until this point, beat teams that they're supposed to, and Pittsburgh's done that to the T. And would I think that teams like Miami, the Raiders, or the Titans potentially might not ask about Russell Wilson in a potential trade? I don't know. It feels like it could be plausible that could be a possibility if Russ really is finding himself in a spot where Justin wins this week, and then in week 5, Mike Tomlin comes out and says that Russ is the starter. Then I think it would be foolish for some other teams to at least not throw that possibility out there of trading for Russ, but I think we're still a long ways away from that. But, the Steelers' fields continue to improve, continue to impress, moving to 3-0, and the next couple weeks aren't necessarily against the hardest opponents, so it's even better of an opportunity for Fields to grow and get better because, again, the end of their schedule is a nightmare. So they need to stack up as many wins as they can right now before we get to playing the Commanders, the Eagles, the Chiefs, and all the AFC North opponents. But for right now, the Steelers are riding high, one of the last remaining undefeated teams, I should say, overall in the NFL. And speaking about wins and getting wins, the Giants got their first win this past Sunday against a fellow AFC North opponent. The Giants defeated the Cleveland Browns this past Sunday. Were we impressed enough with the Giants, enough to kind of give them credit more so in the next couple of games than we would have originally thought? Were we that impressed with the Giants or more disappointed with the Browns yet again? We're going to answer that when we come back after this short break.
For the best and latest podcasts available anywhere, go to the podcast app on your cell phone and type in GSMC to access free content-rich podcasts on health and wellness, book reviews, sports, entertainment, relationships, social media, movies, technology, finance, and even weird news. Subscribe and download the GSMC Podcast Network's family of shows, available everywhere podcasts are found.
Back now on the show to continue recapping some of the games that we saw over the past weekend, talking about now another AFC North team, talking recently just about the Steelers and their win. The Cleveland Browns weren't as fortunate this past weekend. The Giants with an impressive win in Cleveland, 21-15 behind their standout defensive performance, right? They won the game with Daniel Jones playing a pretty solid game. Malik Neighbors impressed as well, but overall, my trophy goes to their defense, right? Because they were all over Deshaun Watson. It was a pretty heavily defensive game as well. There was only three touchdowns in the first half and one in the fourth quarter, and that was pretty much it. It felt like the score was 21-15 for the longest time. There wasn't that much action in the second half overall when both defense kind of, anchored down and started really focusing in on taking some stuff away. The game kind of stalled out a little bit, but credit to the Giants and their defense for holding on to that lead. But you look at this now for the Cleveland Browns overall, it's 2 home games and 2 losses for the Browns. The only win that they got was on the road in Jacksonville, and that one was another ugly game, another defensive heavy game. Both offenses not really doing that much to win some of these games. You know what the Browns kind of remind me of a little bit? And I was thinking about this just now, actually. It came into my mind with some of these low-scoring defensive games where you just do enough to get by. It reminds me so much of just the Steelers last year with Kenny, and then when he gets hurt, Mitch Trubisky, just doing enough here and there to kind of get by, and you win games predominantly with your defense is the kind of vibe I'm getting with Cleveland, right? And it's crazy to say that I'm even thinking about comparing Deshaun to Kenny Pickett, who's a backup now, Mason Rudolph, who again is a backup right now, Mitch Trubisky, another backup right now. The Steelers had 3 backup quarterbacks on their roster last year, and they still managed to get into the playoffs. So can the Browns do the same thing? I guess we've seen it's possible, but I'm just getting that same sort of vibe right now from them. Very low-scoring games, doing or having a play or two on offense where you capitalize on and then you hold on to that lead for dear life. And more often than not, you do enough just to get by. But the Browns have a tough schedule this year. They have, if I'm not mistaken, the hardest schedule in the NFL this year. So whereas the Steelers last year, they weren't necessarily dealing with the toughest of opponents throughout the entire year, I think the Browns have a rough going at it this year. So that could be a factor in all of this. But looking at the game a little bit more in its totality between these two sides, right? You look at Daniel Jones, I mentioned before, he finished 24 of 34 for 236 yards and 2 touchdowns. Only 2 sacks taken as well, so that's a credit to their offensive line for holding guys like Garrett and Zadarius Smith pretty comfortably to only allow 2 sacks. Then you look at Devin Singletary, 16 carries for 65 yards and a touchdown. That was the Giants ran the ball 32 times in this game, so not only did they have a solid pass protection, but also the run blocking was very good, evidently, because running the ball that many times and being pretty productive overall is a good sight to see, right? Because the Giants have been dealing with this offensive line, the deficiencies on it for the longest time, it seems, and they didn't have that many problems this past Sunday, so that's a win for them. And on the other side, the Browns are dealing with a lot of injuries on their offensive line, and they gave up 8 sacks to the New York Giants defense. Only 2 sacks, like I mentioned before, in comparison to Cleveland's, and it stifled a lot of what the Browns were doing, right? Because Deshaun Watson finished 21 of 37, 196 yards and 2 touchdowns. Amari Cooper had a solid game, 86 yards and 2 touchdowns as well. But the turnover battle was a big point in this game. Cleveland lost that battle with 2 fumbles lost by Deshaun Watson. So another praise for the Giants defense, but still more disappointing actions, I think, for the Browns. And you look at how this game kind of played out. Cleveland jumped out to that early lead. You know, the Giants fumbled the opening kickoff, and Watson threw that touchdown on the first play to Amari Cooper. So you're thinking, like, the Browns, fast start, good defense. This could be a very good afternoon for the Cleveland Browns, right? But the good defense, back and forth from the start, had the Giants pretty much still in this game, only down 7-0 until they tied it at 7-7 to end that first quarter. And Malik Neighbors from that point on really got going in the second quarter with 2 touchdowns just in the second quarter, and that extended the lead to 21-7 in favor of the Giants. And again, still from halftime on, it felt like the game stayed at 21-7 or 21-15 for the longest time. The second half really was a drag, if I'm being honest, because the Giants played decent in the first half, and then they kind of stalled out when the Browns really focused in on taking some things away. But still, they didn't get enough help from their offense, basically, the Browns. They didn't get enough help from Deshaun, getting the ball to Judy, to Amari Cooper. Amari Cooper made some big catches, some very impressive ones, but it just wasn't enough at the end of the day. The Giants defensive line played a phenomenal game, not just by shutting down Deshaun Watson, sacking him 8 times, but the running game for Cleveland, again, did not look great. And again, we'll harp on this point. When the running game's not there, you become one-dimensional. And Deshaun Watson, playing to the level that he is right now, being one-dimensional is the last thing you want it to be, right? Because you have Deshaun holding the ball for too long, bad decisions. He should have thrown an interception, I think, to Brian Burns, but he just dropped the ball thrown right at him. So it could have ended up a lot worse for Deshaun and the Cleveland offense, but Cleveland's defense did a good job, like I said, of holding the Giants to 0 points in the second half. But again, they just need more offense to kind of help them out a little bit more. And now Cleveland and the Giants both moved to 1-2 on the year. And just my thoughts on the Browns overall, it's through the first 3 games, they've scored 17 points against the Dallas Cowboys. 18 points was enough to get them the win against the Jacksonville Jaguars, which, based on how we talked about the Jaguars to start this segment, this episode, I think it says more about the Jaguars now, quite frankly, than it does the Browns and how impressive that could have been in that game. And now they put up 15 points on offense yet again. They can't get over scoring 2 touchdowns basically and a field goal or 2. So 2 games now also where they've gone behind in terms of the scoreboard. They've been behind and they've folded. They've folded to the pass rush right from opposing teams. The Giants got after them. The Dallas Cowboys got after them, forced Deshaun in a couple of bad decisions, bad throws, leading to interceptions and fumbles and whatnot. The Giants did the exact same thing. And the O-line, to add insult to injury, has been banged up and got even more injured this past Sunday against the Giants, where You had Willis get hurt, Jedrick Wills get hurt. Conklin, another one of their tackles, was inactive for this game, I believe, with a hamstring injury. And, they've just not been healthy from that standpoint, so you can sort of cut them a little bit of slack, but still, when you look at this scenario, when you look at going behind in games and not being able to come back, getting punched in the face and not being able to respond, we've been, or the Dallas Cowboys have been doing the exact same thing in their games, right? Folding when they've gone down into deficits and not being able to come back. Cleveland, if you look at it, hasn't been that much different. They've been almost doing the same exact thing, and we kill the Cowboys over it, I guess mostly because the run defense has been so horrendous. But in terms of just general picture, they're not too far off from what the Cowboys are also doing. So that's something to be worried about a little bit going forward. And in terms of the Giants now, to kind of wrap it up here with this segment, 2 games for the Giants that they've looked better than week 1's just thrashing to the Minnesota Vikings, but it's a short week now. They're going to play the Dallas Cowboys on Thursday, so it is good that, it's a short period where you can just continue to ride this momentum, but also it's a short week, so that's not something a lot of people like. But are we ready to kind of say that the Giants should be earning a bit more belief from all of us going forward in some of their games, right? Should we just not go into these games expecting the Giants to lose by 2 touchdowns or 10 points or something like that? Maybe. I don't know. I feel like still in their games against the Commanders and this just game against the Cleveland Browns, it just feels like it's been more of the opposition for some portions of the game than it really has been a dominant performance by the Giants. This upcoming game against the Cowboys should be very interesting because the Giants just ran the ball 32 times and the Cowboys can't stop anybody on planet Earth from running the ball, it seems like. So that'll be fascinating to see. And then I'll get a better answer, a better idea of how confident I can be in the Giants. I'm already seeing a lot of people not giving them any bit of a chance, but you never know. You never know because the Cowboys, I think, have been disappointing me more often than not. In terms of my game picks, I've been going pretty predictable on, the Cowboys, any team that plays the Panthers, just to be surprised by the Panthers looking like a completely different team. Do I think the Giants are incapable of doing that to the Cowboys as well? I don't think it's impossible. So that's why I don't think the Cowboys are just going to win by like 3 touchdowns or something like that. I feel like this could be a close game. It's not going to be great for the Cowboys in that sense, but the Giants, I think, holding off one more week until I fully am ready to say that maybe the Giants have a little bit of life, a little bit of fight in them going forward if they play the way that they did against the Cleveland Browns with that defense playing very, very impressive. It should be something to watch just in a couple of days now on Thursday Night Football, but the Giants get their first win. The Cleveland Browns fall to 1-2, but that's not the last thing we're going to talk about. We have one more segment to get to, and just going over some of the comments that some of the Dallas Cowboys players made, like I mentioned before, about their loss to the Baltimore Ravens this past week, dropping them to 1-2. What have DeMarcus Lawrence said? What has Jordan Lewis said? Dak Prescott, Micah Parsons, they all had something to say on it, and we're going to go over it in a couple of seconds. Thank you guys for joining me here on the last segment of today's show, going over some of the things that I heard from some of the Dallas Cowboys players after the loss to the Baltimore Ravens this past week, dropping the Cowboys to 1-2. The fans and everyone is feeling the frustrations, obviously, after having to watch some of the exact same movie for the last 2 weeks, right? Bad defense, bad run defense, leading to giving up big leads. This past week was a little bit different just because they were able to come back, but still getting off to slow starts is very frustrating. Obviously for fans watching it, thinking that the game is basically over by the second quarter. Nobody wants to see that. And with all the frustration we've seen on the sideline through everything, some of the Dallas Cowboys players have come out and addressed some of the frustrations from their point of view, right? What have they seen? What do they feel like should be the solution? And it is a little bit interesting with some of their comments, starting off with Micah Parsons, because not only have we seen their frustrations on the sidelines with Micah on the sideline and his body language, sitting down or talking to the defensive players in frustration. CeeDee Lamb, we saw it this past week with Dak Prescott, maybe not getting him the ball enough, or just being frustrated because he fumbled it, or it just wasn't going their offense's way as a whole on Sunday. Whatever the reason may be, we saw it ourselves on TV on Sunday. But now, after the game, I thought the comments were pretty interesting. You look at what Micah said. He kind of started everything off by saying that they don't need guys to be Superman on their defense. He felt like people were doing too much to kind of make a play, where they needed discipline and needed guys to be in their gaps and follow the game plan. Essentially, they didn't need anybody to be Superman. He just wanted everybody to be more as a team, be playing more as a team. But he wasn't the only one to kind of say something. I have it actually up on here. Also, his pass rushing partner, DeMarcus Lawrence, also had something to say on this. He mentioned how the losing is obviously frustrating. He said not having our stuff together on defense, where we're playing 11-man football. It's all frustrating having a game plan but not following the game plan. Once we get out of playing Little League football and get back to playing pro football, we'll be all right. And afterwards, he also specified staying in your gaps, like Micah Parsons said, applying the coach's teachings, and also doing all the little things right to kind of get back on track. After the first 3 weeks of this season, we've seen the same issues pop up. We've seen DeMarcus Lawrence say it. We've seen Micah Parsons also say it from that standpoint. And on the other side of it, Dak Prescott mentioned how on offense that they can't afford the penalties to stall drives. They need to be more focused to start faster and help the defense out more. So that one's the one I mostly agree with. Saying that you're playing Little League football and things like that. I think that's just more in the frustration, in the heat of the moment, for Micah to also be saying they don't need guys to be Superman. That is true, but I feel like Dak kind of mentioned it in the best way possible, how he kind of said what I've been saying, but without directly saying that this defense just isn't good enough to hold teams down for this offense to be in situations where they can go 3 and out or stall out for multiple drives. Dak mentioned how, this offense just can't afford to do that, to help out the defense a lot more. And that's in an ideal world. I feel like that's where Dak and them ideally start fast. They get out to a 7-point, 10-point lead. And now this defense, I guarantee, would look a lot better. And it looks a lot better, right, from a pass rushing standpoint. You have Micah coming after you. You have DeMarcus Lawrence coming after you. But I feel like when you're defending the run, or just being able to respond from being down, or respond from being in a situation where you're kind of getting punched in the face and you have to find a response, I would feel more comfortable in seeing them overcome that rather than just playing into what they're happy doing, right? They're just happy with getting out to a lead and then just doing ideally what they want to do, right? I need to see them still kind of respond from being punched in the face rather than just all playing out accordingly. And is this Dallas offense capable of doing that for them. We kind of saw it against the Ravens, right? I don't know if that was more to do with the Ravens kind of blowing away leads or this Dallas Cowboys offense sort of finding the rhythm already, where they put up 3 touchdowns in the final 10 to 11 minutes of the fourth quarter in the game against the Ravens, and Dak throws for nearly 400 yards or something like that. Are they capable of doing that right from the start? I feel like you need a running game to do that, and I'm not so convinced with what I've seen from that side of the ball or that area of the offense to be comfortable with that, because Dak threw the ball 51 times on Sunday, and to me that's just not sustainable throughout the entire year. If you need Dak to throw it 40, 50 plus times for you to have a chance, it'll be easier for teams to kind of take that away if they don't fear your running game. If they don't fear it at all, then they're just going to not stack the box, put a lot more people back, and, you're kind of stuck with doing something that you're not comfortable doing or forcing the ball with Dak, leading to turnovers and things like that. So that's one instance of the offense and the defensive side of the ball. But yesterday, the defensive back for the Cowboys, Jayden Lewis, had a bit more of a explicit statement to mention on the Dallas Cowboys. I'll show it to you guys here. Obviously, Jayden Lewis using a bit more stronger language while weighing in on his opinion yesterday. He said, "We got to be more credible, effing accountable every single play. That's 60 minutes of football. It doesn't matter who we play. We got to go there and be detailed in the play. It doesn't matter who we play in this NFL. If we're not doing that, then man, anybody can beat us." And obviously, him using a bit more explicit language, but the message gets across the same way, right? Harping on those details that DeMarcus Lawrence touched on. Just everybody simplifying the game a bit. Because watching some of the Cowboys film, or just watching some of that Cowboys game, you see how in some moments where you kind of really look at the play develop, some guys are kind of rushing through their movements, through their pass rush, it seems, where they might get out of their gaps, trying to go a different way. If the offensive lineman beats them to their gap, they might go the other way around, but that way they're leaving that gap vacant, right, essentially, because the offensive lineman beat them there. They're trying to go the long way around and use their speed, but by that time, the running back is gone, the play's already moved on, and they're out of their gap, and now they're left behind with a wide open, gash lane for the running back to run through. And once you get into that mode, you start panicking, trying to find any sort of easy solution. I think that's where I've seen the Cowboys struggle more often than not. And to me, now looking forward on the schedule for the Dallas Cowboys, we just talked about the Giants. It feels like this game against the Giants couldn't have come at a better time for them, because if they go out and they go beat up on the Giants, or they get beat up again, then this team would have really been, I feel like, destroyed internally. If they go out and lose to the Giants, then everything really starts to fall apart, in my opinion. But I don't mind having or seeing these players be accountable, especially after 2 weeks of that, but it's important now to go out and do it again, right? It's important to go out there now and have this opportunity to go out and prove it now, because we've seen Micah talk about it for the last 2 weeks. We've seen Dak mention it. Now DeMarcus Lawrence is touching on it. Jayden Lewis is not holding anything back when talking about it. To me, I have no problem with you talking about it, but now that we're at a point where it's about to become a trend, a bad habit, if you will, with allowing these big rushing games, you see the frustration starting to boil over. So now, with this opportunity presented in front of you against the Giants, who a lot of people might not consider a great team, it could be a spot where now I want to see him going to actually go do it, right? Not just talk about it, be apparently pretty mad about it, but still going out there and getting run all over on by the New York Giants, right? What we can't do is just talk about it and have it continue to be a bad habit, right? Because you have to try and change something. I want to see them try to adapt to what the Giants are doing, adapting to trying to stop the outside zone or things like that, right? If they need to stop they need to stop other teams from just trying to embarrass them on the run. Along with that, their stars just have to be stars and make their impact on this game, right? Because we have to see guys like Micah, guys like Trayvon Diggs, like DeMarcus Lawrence, Dak, making an impact on this game. All these stars, all their main guys are the ones talking, right? And they're not the ones going out there and making plays, right? We're seeing Micah maybe get beat on a read option to Lamar Jackson. We haven't mentioned DeMarcus Lawrence for the last 2 weeks. Trayvon Diggs is out there, but he's not shutting anybody down per se. So we need to see these guys not just talk about it, but actually go about and do it. Because if they just keep talking about it, then it just becomes noise at that point, right? No one's going to take them seriously. And if they're not being taken seriously and Mike Zimmer, the coaching, is just kind of allowing this to continue on and not adapting to how these teams are attacking them, then we find ourselves in a scenario where the Cowboys are just who we think they are, and they can't do anything about it, which is not what you'd expect from this team, as much as they are critiqued for their bad defense and not allowing or not addressing anything in the offseason. You got to show at least a bit of fight, and you look frustrated, you sound frustrated, but now I actually want to see them go out and do it. And doing it against the Giants might not be impressive, but to some people, but at least it's a start, and we have to start seeing this defense kind of get back to what made them prolific last year. And if they could do that, get a little bit more from their offense, then we could start kind of dying down on the criticism, right? And I think that's what the Cowboys need right now. They don't need this to get any louder. They need to calm everybody down and go out there and put on a good performance, right? Not just winning by 3 points or anything like that. Needing to go out there and impress against the Giants in a short week where you can shut everybody up pretty quickly. It's out there for them. They just have to go out and do it. But that is everything I wanted to address on that topic, and that will do it for today's show. Thank you guys for joining me on today's episode. Please remember to like, follow, and subscribe to the GSMC Chip Shot Football Podcast, as well as following the network on all forms of social media. Check out more live episodes on both of those networks, as well as other forms of content around the NFL, and more live episodes every weekday at 6:30 p.m. Eastern Time, all covering the NFL, all more headlines and coverage around this league with me, Manny Maradiaga, as your host. Thanking you guys for joining me again, and I'll be back on here same time tomorrow to cover some more topics around the NFL.
Let's go. I wake up to a little bit of drool on my pillow, feel like it's gonna be a bad day. Yeah, I'm tired of shit, and the coffee ain't hit yet, damn, ain't